Greetings, guys, gals, and non binary pals. Welcome to the Chatter After Daily, the show where we're talking everything in the world of movie news and pop culture. It is February 16th, 2023, a Thursday. Ryan, it's been a bit since we've had a Thursday show, so we actually get to talk about what's coming out this weekend. First off, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, and we have no shortage of things to talk about on this Thursday. I mean, we've got an embarrassment of riches of time.
So many topics to talk about. I feel like the morning started off really strong, and then it's just been nothing but hit after hit ever since. We might as well just get right into it, guys. We've got four main topics, and of course the now playing segment that we are going to get to towards the end of the show. But first up, we've had two trailers drop today. Trailer number one being another look at John Wick Chapter 4. And it was only about 90 seconds, but my goodness, does this movie look amazing?
It does, it really does. And honestly, when I first heard that, I heard that needle drop, I was like, oh, Chad Stahelski must be a Sopranos fan. But then I realized doing some research, this is actually a song released by Nas. So that's on me, but the song is awesome. And I'm going to be listening to it when I run tomorrow morning, but that's another story for another time. This trailer looked just outstanding. I've seen some people say that the John Wick movies have kind of lost steam because the first one was so emotionally driven because of the whole dog killing thing. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from, but I have not grown tired of these movies in the slightest. These movies are so, especially number 3. I mean, they just went completely crazy with it. And just some of the cast that's in here, you got Clancy Brown, you got Bill Skarsgård, Donnie Yen. I mean, the movie just looks like it's going to be so much fun. We got the trailer with John Wick playing in traffic and doing kung fu there. It's just, I'll have triple helpings, please.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's labeled the final trailer. I don't think I needed to see anything else from this movie to be immediately sold, but my goodness, does this look like an action-packed ride? When you were mentioned earlier about the reception of the franchise going forward from Chapter 1, like you said, it was very emotionally charged. And on one hand, I totally agree. I feel like at this point, John Wick as a franchise we just have to accept that chapters 2 through 4 are basically an entirely different concept. Like, we're seeing more assassins, we're seeing more of this insane universe, whereas the first one was a very grounded, albeit action heavy story. So I can see why that would rub some people the wrong way, but for me, I just embrace the nature of this franchise. Like you said, Donnie Yen and Keanu Reeves, that alone has me sold on this movie. Like, that by itself is enough to get me in the theater. And I just want to go back to the beginning of this trailer right quick. It's nothing major, nothing crazy. But you mentioned that needle drop, which was perfect. But for me, the biggest thing of this trailer was when we had the little title card say March 24th. And that reminded me that this movie is so close. I didn't realize how soon we're going to be getting this film. I guess I just lost track of time or blanked out, I guess, because it's right around the corner. And that makes me so, so happy. I can't wait to see this movie.
Yeah, this whole movie is just going to be scenes, I tell you, and scenes in the best way possible. But I had this thought when we were talking about just how 1 is one thing and then chapters 2, 3, and 4 are just a completely different thing. I think the nearest I can compare this to is the Rambo series. If you think about First Blood Part 1, that's a very sad movie about and a commentary about PTSD and Vietnam and that whole thing. And then 2 through the rest of them are just sly, just being like, oh, fire arrows? Don't mind if I do. That's pretty much the rest of the Rambo movies. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's the direction that they went. And I feel like Wick, Chapter 1, was very much a very sad and grounded story of a man trying to get revenge in the only way he knew how. And then 2 through 4 is like John Wick versus the world, and I don't like the world's odds.
That is the perfect way of putting it, honestly. I do not want to be on the bad side of John Wick. I will tell you that very much. Like we learned that through all the films, but seeing how it just escalates again and again and again as the franchise goes on, it and this is not as good of a comparison, I guess, as what you just said with Rambo, but even Fast and Furious, right? Go to Fast and Furious now and the first couple of movies, completely different franchise.
Yeah.
Maybe in a good way, maybe not in a good way, depending on who you ask. But I just love the evolution and seeing the progress that these films have made over time. So for me, that alone keeps me invested. And again, they've all been good, even though they all have been very different films. I can't wait to see what Chapter Four gives us for sure.
Yeah, and Keanu's still going strong at nearing 60. I mean, the man is still
Yes.
just all gas, no brakes. And one more note before we do move on. This movie's 2 hours and
Yeah.
49 minutes long. This is the longest movie in the franchise by a significant margin. And honestly, I'm not even mad. I'll take it. If the runtime and when I do review this, if it does feel long in the bad sense, but with foresight sitting in this moment right now, I'll take the length. I don't care.
That's the thing, right? Like this is an action movie and the type of franchise John Wick is, that is a long time. Like the franchise, each one, my heart is racing for the entire runtime. So I'm really interested to see how they're gonna balance that. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot more story and narrative beats that kind of allow you moments to breathe. But yeah, almost 3 hours of nonstop John Wick action. Just sign me up. Can't wait. So the next trailer on the docket, it's complete opposite of what John Wick is. We've got to talk about Tetris. Now, when this movie was announced, everybody laughed and like wrote it off as a cash grab and all that stuff. But I'm gonna be honest with you, Ryan. This looks really good.
Yeah, I was going to say, you bring up when I first heard of the tech. Are you serious? Like, have we a fit? Like, we're making a movie about the 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 block game that I used to play on my dad's old Game Boy. Like, are we really doing this? But watching this trailer, it sold me. It really did, especially considering that it's going to Apple TV Plus, which they have a very high standard of quality, and not to mention we're getting Taron Egerton here as we're footage. Not to mention that it's being produced by Marv, which is Matthew Vaughn's production company. I don't know if he's directing this or he must have some hand in this. But just looking at this, I couldn't be more sold.
I'm taken aback by how entertaining this trailer is, and everything you said is right. Like the very notion, the concept of this film is ridiculous when you really think about it. But I love how watching the trailer again here, how serious they're approaching it. Like this very well could have gone the weird pixels route, right? Where it's like, yeah, this is a game about one of the first video games ever made, and it's ridiculous and it's goofy. But no, they're telling us a mostly real story. I'm sure they're embellishing things a little bit, but I'm excited. And Apple TV, as we were saying before, they're known for quality. Like they're quietly becoming the best streaming service, honestly, because when they drop a show or a movie, 8 times out of 10, I'm confident that it's going to be a hit. Honestly, we were talking about that with Ted Lasso just the other day. So I'm excited for Tetris. We've got a synopsis here that I can read off right quick. It's very short. Taron Egerton stars in the new Apple original film inspired by the true story of how one man risked his life to outsmart the KGB and turn Tetris into a worldwide sensation. That alone sounds so ridiculous that I am already in. I'm bought in. I'm fascinated to see how they bring all of this together over at Apple TV. But yeah, a really good day for some trailers, I must say.
Yeah, no doubt. And just looking at the trailer before, one more note before we go on. This trailer kind of reminded me a little bit of like Argo crossed with stuff like The Courier, which is a supremely underrated spy movie from 2021 starring Benedict Cumberbatch. I recommend that movie highly. That movie's very good indeed. crossed with just a bit of Bridge of Spies. Really, it's very much like a very grounded, very like weirdly espionage movie tone, which for a movie about Tetris, I mean, and I love me some Tetris, so I'm not trying to throw any shade, but about Tetris, this movie has way more effort put forth into it than it has any right to be. And honestly, I'm grateful that they did go the
Yeah,
effort.
100%. Bridge of Spot. Yeah, that's look at this. This has way too much effort, like you were saying, put in. This could have been written off so easily, and I'm glad they embraced it. I can't wait to see it because this is so entertaining.
Yeah.
But we've got to talk about this next bit of news. It's not a trailer. So we've got a new announcement. And first off, shout out to a friend of the show, Caleb, over at Knights Media. You released this rumor like a month ago that How to Train Your Dragon was going to possibly get a live action reboot. And we officially got confirmation on that today from the Hollywood Reporter. This is our second story. They say, quote, taking a massive swing, Universal Pictures has put in motion a How to Train Your Dragon live action movie with Dean DeBlos, the filmmaker behind the original trilogy, back as the writer, director, and producer. The feature project is already in development, and Universal has already selected a date, March 14th, 2025, for its release. And apparently, they're even starting the casting process. So this is a pretty good ways into production, which is surprising because at this rate, most films usually announce they most studios announce the films and then they get all of the casting and all that stuff underway months after. So this is already pretty far along. First off, Ryan, I just want to ask you, do you care about this at all? Do you think this is a good idea? I know we're in an era of live action reboots all of the time, but this is by far the quickest we've had that happen. Like How to Train Your Dragon, for context, everyone, the last film in the trilogy came out in 2019.
Mm.
So like barely 4 years ago, this series has ended and it's already getting rebooted. How are you feeling so far?
So when I think about DreamWorks, I think of their two biggest and best trilogies, them being Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon.
Mhm.
Those are the gold standards of DreamWorks. You cannot touch them. And Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was excellent, and I would consider that in the conversation of DreamWorks' best. But really, it's either Kung Fu Panda or How to Train Your Dragon. Sometimes I go back and forth. I love the How to Train Your Dragon movies. Each one is great in its own regard. I have mixed feelings about this because, number one, I'm glad that they got Dean DeBloss on board. It's clear that he was the beating heart behind it. So if they got him, then clearly he feels like there's some juice left to squeeze in this story. And they're pretty much, they're going through casting already, which, I mean, we've read stories about how, oh, it's planning and then it's dumped, and then it's planning and then it's dumped. So clearly they're more than off the ground with this. That's not going to change. So those are two green lights for me
Yeah.
right there. However, How to Train Your Dragon came along in a time where I was just starting to appreciate animation more. So it means quite a lot to me. Live action remakes have not really had a great track record. Jungle Book in 2016 is like the one thing that I'll give it like a okay, they actually did something different and I appreciate that. But if Disney can strike out more times doing this than not, I don't know what DreamWorks is going to do with this. So I guess my mood is cautious optimism. I'm glad they got the creative team on board. I'm glad they're clearly putting some force behind this and trying to give this some sauce. But man, I'm so conflicted about this because the How to Train Your Dragon movies mean so much to me. They had no right to be as
Yeah.
good as they were, but yet somehow they were. I just I need to see a trailer first. So cautious optimism, and I need to see a trailer first. That's the period at the end of the sentence.
How to Train Your Dragon for me, I'm right there with you. It's one of DreamWorks' best. It arguably, yeah, is by far their best franchise, especially like the trilogy. Every film is so strong. Whereas, as much as we love Shrek, a lot of those movies aren't that great. It's only like one or two that really stand out above the rest, right? How to Train Your Dragon is perfect in the way where you can argue that it goes toe to toe with everything at Pixar. Like it can fight Toy Story. That's how good it is for being a perfect animated franchise. The only reason that I have hope for this is because they are bringing back the original team to write and direct and produce. So, what that at least leads me to believe is that they have the passion behind it. Like, this isn't just the typical cash grab that we would see of rebooting a franchise. It's more of they probably had a really cool idea to make this work or that they wanted to explore with the franchise, giving it another go. And that gives me a little bit of hope. So, what's interesting to me is that How to Train Your Dragon is just going to be another one of many fantasy shows coming out or movies coming out by that time, right? We're going to already have that Dungeons and Dragons movie that everybody's going to forget by the time it comes out. We're going to have
Hmm.
House of the Dragon. We're going to have Rings of Power. We're going to have Avatar: The Last Airbender. We're going to have One Piece. We're going to have all these other shows and movies already occupying that big fantasy dragon scope and space. I'm fascinated to see if it can carve out its own niche in that demographic because as much as we love How to Train Your Dragon, I don't know how many people are going to be on board for a reboot. Again, 4 years removed from the last one. By the time this comes out, we're going to be 6 years, which still isn't that much time between installments. But I think it could be fun. Like out of all of the DreamWorks movies, this has the most potential as a live action franchise. My only question is pulling up this image again. We've got Hiccup and Toothless. Dragons are really hard to do and portray in live action, especially to the degree of cuteness that Toothless has. Uh, that's where I wonder how they're going to stand out above the rest, right? We already had Game of Thrones and now House of the Dragon showing us what the standard is for these creatures in live action. How do you portray that ferocity, but also that warmth and love between these two that's not usually seen in this type of story in live action? You know, those are the moments where I'm kind of hesitant, but overall, the themes of Vikings and dragons and family, all of that stuff is still in the DNA of the story that I think can translate very well. It just feels a little unnecessary, but the creators being behind it and backing it, I think, gives me a bit more hope than I normally would have in this scenario, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think like what you said, the unnecessary feeling that is permeating throughout. I mean, that just goes double for me right there. But they got Dean DeBloss on board, so clearly he was like, okay, I think I can do something with this. So, like I said,
Hmm.
cautious optimism.
I know, right? Like that's the thing. It's gonna be tough. I'm hopeful. You know, I guess I'm cautiously optimistic is the word. It can't be worse than The Last Airbender, Dragon Ball Evolution, Death Note, Cowboy Bebop. You know, the list goes on. um, the next topic of the show, we got to talk about Marvel. Because just this week we had a whole discussion about the MCU and the oversaturation and why that's kind of leading to a quality control issue. It's funny that we were just having this conversation on Tuesday. We get a report coming from the Hollywood Reporter yet again, saying that Marvel will slow production down on their Disney Plus shows. This is a quote coming from THR. They said, "quote In what feels like a different timeline." At July's San Diego Comic Con, Marvel chief Kevin Feige put the pedal to the metal when he outlined 5 Disney Plus shows for 2023. What If Season 2, Echo Season 1, Loki Season 2, Ironheart, and Agatha Coven of Chaos as limited series. Now, sources tell The Hollywood Reporter that Loki Season 2 and the Samuel L. Jackson led Secret Invasion are the only sure bets to debut this year. Even projects that wrapped filming months ago, such as the Hawkeye spinoff Echo and the Wakanda Forever spinoff Ironheart, are unlikely to arrive in 2023 as the studio spreads out its content and tinkers in post production. And shows in development such as Nova, which is, something that we forgot was a thing, at least I did, are now on a slower path. This is a quote from Kevin Feige. He says, quote, "The pace at which we're putting out on the Disney Plus shows will change." I think this is nothing but good news personally. We have heard terrible stories of Marvel and the VHX teams that are putting these shows together and how they're crunching all day and they're fast tracking these shows. And we've talked ad nauseum about how the quality has suffered, right? Like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is sitting at a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes. I haven't seen it yet. It came out today. If you guys watched it, let us know what you thought. But Phase 4 had a lot of great shows and great movies, but they also had a lot of very bad shows and movies. And so I think this is nothing but good things because they're able to sit back, reevaluate, take a look at the stories, take a look at the effects, and give them proper time to develop all of those things, as opposed to saying we need 5 shows on Disney Plus this year. Am I just being too optimistic, Ryan? How are you feeling about the Disney Plus news we got today?
I think this is only a good thing because I think they definitely need to take a more approach. I think because I have not seen all of the Disney Plus shows. I've seen some, but not all. And it's kind of become like we talked about on the Tuesday show with the Quantum Mania stuff. It feels like too much. So I think this scaling back is nothing but a good thing.
This is a great comment here, Arcwinder. They seem to have learned not to rush 10 mid shows in 1 year. Being serious, I think this will slow down the fatigue people have felt in Phase 4, but I don't think the trend will reverse. And yeah, that's the thing. Superhero fatigue is not real. It's not a real thing. I don't believe in it. Otherwise, superhero comic books would have stopped selling. But guess what? Comics had their best year in sales last year in 2022. Superhero fatigue is only a thing when, like you said, you putting it bluntly, when you get 10 mid projects a year, you get burned out. Not because you don't like superheroes, but because Marvel's not producing quality content. And that to me is the ultimate issue. So I appreciate that they're self-aware to the point where they are going to change things up a little bit. That might also just go down to Bob Chapek putting all his chips in the Disney Plus basket and Bob Iger having to come in and try and play cleanup a little bit. That's the thing to keep in mind too. Like Kevin Feige is the mastermind of Marvel Studios. He still has to answer to the head of the Walt Disney Company. So that also could have just played a major factor, a major role in the quality of the shows we've gotten. Like, why are we getting an Agatha show in the first place is beyond me. These are the questions that I have and the decisions that have always been weird with the Disney Plus side of Marvel. Like, Nova is being delayed. Nova might actually be really cool. And it's a new character. I love it. That sounds amazing. But Echo and Agatha may not have needed their own shows per se. And that again might just be the flaw with Disney Plus is that they're trying to tell smaller stories, but they're choosing characters that the audience doesn't particularly care about. So if they're going to do that, you're going to have to make sure they hit because we don't want Echo to become the subject of online hate campaigns again, like a lot of female led shows do. You want to make sure that's as good as possible to have a reason to point out the trolls, right? If a show is just naturally bad, it you can't really fight the trolls on some things anymore because like, yeah, the show sucks. But if they're still hating it and it's actually top tier Marvel good, then we can differentiate the trolls from people who actually are critical thinkers. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Okay, couple tidbits before we move on to now playing. There's a Hellboy movie that got announced. Hellboy: The Crooked Man will be directed by Brian Taylor, and Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden will write the script. It's going to be shooting this April. This is coming from Discussing Film. This is like breaking as we started going live. I don't know why we keep rebooting Hellboy, but please stop. That's all I got to add. Ryan, you have any thoughts on that?
To quote the coach for the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, we do not care.
Truth. David Arbor. No, 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 not again. Well said. Well said. Okay, guys, we're going to be moving on. Gotta get this Marvel banner down. There we go. Now playing. This is the part of the show where we look at everything coming out this week and tell you what's playing. First up, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Ant-Man and the Wasp find themselves exploring the quantum realm, interacting with strange new creatures, and embarking on an adventure that pushes them beyond the limits of what they thought was possible. This movie has been getting roasted by film Twitter, but I have seen some Marvel fans say that they have come out enjoying it for the most part. So depending what type of, again, superhero fatigue, where you are at right now with the MCU, maybe you'll enjoy it, maybe you'll find it mediocre, like a lot of the critics have. But Marvel movies are back with Ant-Man and the Wasp. I'll watch it eventually. Ryan, I know you said you're doing a review of it. Have you happened to see it today? I know it came out early on Thursday. Maybe you've gotten a chance to watch it.
No, actually, I won't be able to see it until Saturday. But one more note before we do move on. I'm just going to keep an open mind, like I always do, because I only have my opinion. And so that's what's going into the review, and I will try my hardest not to be swayed by anything that I hear.
Gotcha. Arkwinder says Ant-Man 3, the movie's so bad that it makes Ant-Man 2 look good. Hey, this is the wrong chat for that. We actually like Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's a fun time.
Yeah.
Maybe not a great time, but it's a fun time. But your feelings are noted, Arkwinder. We appreciate you. Marlowe, we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. Detective Philip Marlowe becomes embroiled in an investigation with a wealthy family in Bay City, California, after a beautiful blonde hires him to find her former lover. This is another one that, according to the few critics who actually reviewed it this week, it's sitting at a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, that's not the be-all, end-all when it comes to film criticism, but it's just something of note when you're picking out what you're going to see at the movies. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the week, but I'm still interested in checking this out. It's, again, good counter programming to Ant-Man and the Wasp, a nice detective story, as opposed to this big, sprawling multiverse quantum realm adventure. But I'm excited to check it out. How about you?
Yeah, so am I. I'm thinking this might be a sleeper hit, an early sleeper hit for this year.
Nice. Speaking of a sleeper hit, though, Of an Age, that is a film that's set during 1999. An 18-year-old amateur ballroom dancer has an unexpected and intense 24-hour romance with a friend's older brother. This is quietly getting major positive buzz and reviews. I've heard nothing but good things about this movie. Again, great counter programming to the big Marvel event happening in theaters right now, if that's something you guys are willing to check out. That's our show for this week. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe so you don't miss our streams. We're on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And our winner in the chat says, I do appreciate smaller movies seem to be growing now in popularity, kind of showing that there's still demand for new, unique stories. Yes. That's why we're here. Bring light to them, bring some attention to them, because if you don't want to waste your time and get frustrated with Ant-Man and the Wasp, which seems like it is a real possibility, maybe check out some of the smaller stuff. You might find something that you really enjoy. But again, guys, if there's anything you want us to talk about, let us know in the chat. Let us know on Twitter at the Chatter After. You can find me, Mike, at Novice Cinephile. You can find Ryan at RyanCam20. Links to his YouTube channel and Twitter are in the description down below. And we'll see you guys next week. Until next time, keep watching movies.